We knew straight away that Clive wanted to be a Chinese puzzle box, but that would have been a little bit boring as far as I was concerned to just do a Chinese puzzle box. So I started looking at some ancient writings and symbolism from North Africa, China, and some of the ancient world as well as Old English mythology. So the process of making the box starts with a piece of wood. So it's exactly 3 inch by 3 inch by 3 inch. There was originally some symbolism behind the measurements. 3 by 3 is a magic number, and back in 87 or anything, not many people knew about magic numbers, but of course it's now used for stucco and lots of things. But 3 by 3 by 3 was really important. To colour the box, we used a wood stain, and the wood stain was mahogany mixed 50-50 with ivory, and then alizarin crimson, which is a very dark red paint, and a dark blue. It may have been Prussian blue. This is the etching. Now, as you can see, the etching is highly delicate, and it had to be designed in such a way that when the etching process took hold of the brass, the etching didn't fall to pieces, so it stays as it is. I then had to, on the square boxes, it was relatively easy. I could just cut these out and apply them to the box, which I did with PVA. It was much more difficult on the shaped boxes because you actually had to trim and cut through these surfaces and then put them back together again because they did fall apart. So that was a horrible process. Once that was all dry, I then used a matte polyurethane varnish, which had to be applied one side at a time and then allowed to dry, and then you could turn the box over and do the next side. So you had 6 times that amount of time for it to dry to do one box. So as a result of that, you'd do maybe 10-15 boxes at a time, but it was a really slow, laborious process, and the number of layers had to go on in such a way that it didn't ripple the surface and that you ended up with a flat surface that was smooth to the touch. The other problem we also had was, obviously at the end of the day, it's not a mythical box, it's a film prop, and it gets dropped, it gets thrown, people are pulling it in and out of pockets and things, and there was always the risk of an element of the etchings getting caught on a hand or just bashed on the floor or anything else, and so I was forever lying on the floor below the actors or Cenobites, and as they dropped it I would try and catch it, save myself another 8 hours work. The etching process is a photographic process, so the original design was done at an ASIO architectural drawing table, and that had all the equipment on it that I needed to get the angles right for squares within squares, etc. I then used Indian ink in fine rotring architectural pens to design this and draw it all out, and then that gets photographed, put onto a plate, and then the metal is dropped into a bath of acid, and the acid over a certain number of minutes eats away through the design, and hopefully if you designed it properly it doesn't just fall away and go to mush. It will maintain its design integrity. So it took a lot of thought process to work out how you could draw a line or take a line away and wonder what was going to happen. So you were always, as you were designing, thinking, if I take this line away because I want this gap for the wood to show, what's going to be the result of that within the etching process. As you were drawing these things, I would be scamping things out, and if there was a way of subtly putting something in that didn't look repetitive, because although the box is symmetrical in many ways, it's the detail here that stops it being symmetrical. So basically I was just looking at different things as I went through. Sometimes I'd sketch it in a piece of pencil first, sometimes I'd do it in black and white to see if it did look like that. Once you'd concentrated on it, did it work? Some of them don't work, but that's okay. So the beautiful woman is simply an eye, an eyebrow, and where her other eye is, a spike has come out from the opening box and embedded itself in her. You can see a little bit of hair coming down here to give the impression furrowed brow, but it's very stylised. Again, it's very subtle. There are two of them, but here's one of them. And so there's his head there, and here's his back, and there's his leg, and there's his arm, and there's the box. If you just have a look here, it's purely by luck, it's worked out the right way, but here's an eye, an eyebrow, again, like in the beautiful woman, a jawbone, a bit of a nose, and then here a mouth, a dimple with a chin, possibly an ear over there, but it's there. And again, what it shows is a spike, so it's saying this is what's going to happen to you when you've opened this. They were designed so to look like symbols, but in fact that one's quite obvious, it's a sort of sabre-y thing. All of these are sharp, they look sharp and they look very sharp, and in fact they are sharp when you're actually making the box. But the inspiration for these came from an exhibition which it still exists at the Pitt Rivers Museum of very old surgeons' instruments, and also instruments of torture as well. And you can see that, and if you look at the photographs of the exhibition, you can see straight away that there's a link between this and that. The engineer was an interesting one because everything else on the box was designed within a square. The engineer that's hidden away in the design had to be designed once the box had turned into its star shape, and then worked out from there. He's got a big head here, teeth, eyes, his body is curved round, and he's got a sharp sting in the tail. He's got a large hind leg up here, foreleg here, and another foreleg with claws down here. And what happens is the box basically cuts this image into four when it's in a star. What you're trying to get across with this design is that there are instructions hidden away and warnings. So again, you can have, if you do that with your hand and look at your wrist, and you get a Y shape, and you start looking for it within here. So here's one hand holding something that's sharp. here's another hand holding something that's round, and where there are 3 circles here, so you've got one hand here and a wrist, 3 growing circles which represents the box growing out, and another hand. But the most important thing, of course, is that this side of the box and the side on the opposite side of the cube represent the opening of the sharp little petals, and then what happens straight away is something very sharp and nasty is going to come out and tear your face off. So there are warnings here. There are warnings and little hints of instructions. I don't actually have a element configuration myself. I gave them all away to my friends and cast and crew on the film at the end of shooting. But what I do have is that very last etching, and that etching was the first to come off the etching production line. It's called a 00 print, and it's given to the artist as a gift as well as a point of proof for signing off. And so that was just put away in a drawer, and remains very dear to me.